All right, Reid, let's talk a little AFC here. And this is some pretty interesting odds, I think, for me anyway, specifically when we start looking at these division odds and which teams that I am super high on, which teams I'm super low on, and various, markets I think out there you can find even some better numbers. But we're going to use DraftKings numbers here for our purposes. And when you look here on the AFC side of things, I am kind of perplexed as to why we're still looking at the Colts as only, it's actually moved 10 cents since last week. So minus 135 for the Colts to win this AFC South. Look, the Texans have no shot whatsoever. The Jags, I think we all think, can only take a step forward after the debacle with the coaching and all the stuff going last year. Trevor Lawrence gets another year under his belt, et cetera, et cetera. But they're probably a couple of years away, year or two away. And so it's almost to me a two-team race with a Titans team that I think got exponentially worse and was so incredibly lucky last year as it was anyway. So what am I missing here from your opinion that the Colts at minus 135 to win the division? I understand it's not sexy. You have to part with your money for 6 months here on a minus 135 bet.
Right.
But I think a lot of stuff would really have to go wrong here for this Colts team to not take that division.
Yeah, and I think that's it, Matt, right? When you take a look at the Colts specifically, you're right on the Texans. I think you can bet the over on the regular season wins for the Texans if you want to, but let's not get too crazy with the division. They're not winning it anytime soon. What I think a lot of what you're seeing with this specifically and why it's not more is there's a lot of changes with the Colts as well, mainly in the defensive coordinator in Eberflus and the quarterback Carson Wentz. I would argue that Wentz, when we take a look at just who he is and the sentiment around him, well, it's inaccurate. He doesn't. You're right. He's not a good guy in the locker room. And then you see it and you compare it to Matt Ryan. I think inherently everyone thinks that's a grade up. When you take a look at the numbers, though, Wentz had a higher touchdown percentage than Matt Ryan last year. He had less interceptions than Matt Ryan last year. And I said they're two completely different offenses with Atlanta and with Indy.
I was about to say, Matt Ryan was throwing to me and you last year.
Right, exactly.
It actually might have been an upgrade if he had us out there.
Exactly. So I get there's that. But when you take a look at positive EV, when you take a look at risk on, risk off, I get it. Completely positive EV is with Indy. Tennessee, not sold on Tennessee either. I would argue, though, that if you want your money to go longer, the Jags is probably the long tail bet of what happens if Doug Peterson is that much better, right?
Yeah.
What happens if Travis Etienne is that much better, James Robinson is that much better, and Trevor Lawrence, along with who they brought in on the offensive line, is that much better. So that's where I'm looking at with this division in the AFC South, and less on, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's easy to think that the Colts are going to run away with this division, right? It's just completely easy. But, again, how much of an upgrade is Matt Ryan? I'm not too sure at this stage in his career he is that much of an upgrade against Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I'm a Carson Wentz hater, so I'm probably incredibly biased here and the wrong guy to look at this from an objective standpoint. Kelley, I know you and I are kind of simpatico here on this one. I guess more than anything for me, it comes down to you look at the Titans squad here that loses their top receiver, their all-pro receiver, and whether you thought Julio Jones made a difference in that offense or not, he's out of town as well. So it really, for me, it's more of who competes with the Colts as much as me being so incredibly high on the Colts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think that it's their division to lose already, in my opinion. I get is you take some of those weapons away from the Tennessee Titans, who I think every weapon you take away from a guy like Ryan Tannehill, it's just exponentially more important than it would be to another quarterback. I think he's a very average quarterback in this league, and when he doesn't have those guys to throw to, I think it's going to become a lot tougher when this offense is going to be – it's already very one-dimensional with how they run the ball, and I think it's only going to get even worse from there. So, I mean, like Reid said, unless somehow we see this superhuman season from some of the Jags' young stars that we're really not expecting at this point, yes, I think it is the Colts division to lose.
Reid, over under 2.5 games Malik Willis starts for the Titans this year.
Oof. I'm going to say under. I still think he's still raw around the edge. I think what you're seeing is, and especially in the quarterback room, quarterback landscape in the NFL, it's like it's a rubber band, right? It's a trend where we wanted to start these rookies early, but look at where I mean, Trevor Lawrence, we know, was the best since Andrew Luck. And even look at Andrew Luck when he started. If you don't have a foundational offensive line to protect your franchise, I'm not saying Malik Willis is the franchise for Tennessee, but it's sort of a wait-and-see process now. I know Jordan Love is really just waiting and probably won't even take a meaningful snap for the Packers, outside of like Week 17. But you want to make sure these guys are set up for success. And right now, like you guys mentioned, I mean, it is Derrick Henry. It is 8-man plus boxes, probably 50% of the time on the defensive side, because you have a rookie out wide who takes place for A.J. Brown. And then you're going to want a rookie under center. That's not going to put seats or butts in the seats. So I'd say under.
Let's look at the AFC North here, where we have 4 plus money teams. Ravens plus 155, Bengals plus 180, Browns plus 320, and then the Steelers, the long shot here at 10-1. I'm kind of riding off the Steelers. I know that's probably maybe a little bit foolish here, but this division is so incredibly strong with 3 teams that I think are much, much better than them from a roster construction perspective. And that quarterback position for me, again, really does stick out for the Steelers. I think that we see, Ritter. I think that we see Pickett for at least 6 or 7 games or something this year. So I'm looking at the other 3 here. Ravens still have the contract stuff looming with Lamar. Does that bother him? I don't really know. But how have you kind of started to, now that we have at least a little bit of clarity with what's going on with Deshaun Watson, not likely to see him for at least probably 8 to 10 games, something like that. How are you viewing this?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to take a feature on this backfield for the Browns, especially if Kareem Hunt is gone. I mean, Nick Chubb could be the guy. Right. So at plus 1,000. And I will get to that in a little bit. At plus 1,000 for him to be the leading rusher. I mean, he was so close until Derrick Henry had a 500-yard game in the last game of the season. But you take a look at these teams. Cincinnati. They now have a second-year wideout in Jamar Chase, who broke all records, right, as a rookie wideout. Now he gets even more experience in this offense. And what you love about Cincinnati, and that's where I'm going with this at plus 180 to win this division, is they made so many improvements on the offensive line. Yeah. They spent money to make sure that they're protecting Joe Burrow. They do not want, I'm going back to the Colts here, to happen to him, to what happened to Andrew Luck. So when you take a look at that, and you take a look at essentially this division, I mean, he's extremely efficient. 34 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. Young in his career as a quarterback is extremely efficient, and he led the league in completion percentage above expectations. So all of that considered, now with that wide receiver core that they have and, decent defense, I like the Bengals here.
We're going to hit the other 2 AFC divisions, hit the NFC as well. Coming back on Primetime Action. I didn't talk the AFC East with you too much here, Reid, because, listen, the Bills are minus 230 to take it down. Dolphins plus 450, Patriots 5-1, and the Jets a super long shot at 28-1, rightfully so. Now they're going to be without their starting quarterback for at least a few weeks. And so we look here, I guess the question for me is not necessarily, do you think the Bills are going to win the division? I think everybody thinks that the Bills are going to win the division. My question, I guess, then is, what team do you feel like is going to finish second in this division? And do you think that there is any chance in the world that they could actually push the Bills?
I do think that one team in particular probably could. And again, it's a matter of how do these things play out, right? And that's the Dolphins. And I think that's not really a hot take. I think a lot of people are high on the Dolphins right now with the additions that they've made, mainly Tyreek Hill. But to your point, Matt, I think where the value is in not necessarily betting this division and who's going to win, because laying 225 or 230 on the Bills is probably a fool's errand, because we don't know how Ken Dorsey is going to be either. As in USC, he was the quarterback's coach. That's a big change in Brian Daboll, and that's why we like a lot of the stuff that Giants are putting down. It's the Miami Dolphins in the exacta finishes, so Buffalo Bills finishing first, Miami second. That's plus 110 on DK Sportsbook. And then the exact division finish with the Bills first, Dolphins second, Patriots third, and Jets fourth. That's plus 240. So there's other ways you can bet this. Yeah. And really, when it comes down to it, is right, does the stuff on paper for the Dolphins translate on the field? How good is Tyreek Hill going to be? Is he going to stay healthy? We know he's got a lot of soft tissue issues with his, when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs. How is that going to work out now with Jalen Waddle, with 2 receivers that profile similarly? And look, they got a bunch of running backs, and we know that San Francisco's offense, they had 3 or 4 that they would rotate. And so you have Raheem Mostert, you have Chase Edmonds. You have a lot of guys back there that could make a difference or who have made a difference in offenses previously. So can all of that be put on paper? And their defense is solid, too, in Miami.
Yeah, I believe so as well. The one thing I really liked about the Bills last year, while I was kind of like, man, I just like the Bills here, and it's hard for me to make a case otherwise. They had missed Trubisky, so even if something did happen to Josh Allen, he had to miss 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it might be. You had a guy that could come in and play. Well, they go out to get Case Keenum, a guy with a lot of experience, to where if you lose a Josh Allen for a month because of a sprained ankle or whatever it might be, you got a guy that you can put back there who, yes, he is nowhere near the player that Josh Allen is, but you're not putting in some scrub that doesn't have real game experience, right? You're putting in a guy who's run several different offenses, who's got a ton of time at the position. So I kind of like them again from that aspect where I'm just kind of like, hey, look, the only way I think they get derailed is if Josh Allen has a super long-term injury, but a short-term injury deal, I think Case Keenum can go 500 in a 4-game stretch if he has to start for the squad.
Yeah, and he has. He was the starting caliber quarterback for the Vikings for a very long time. And look, he's no Chase Daniels in terms of backups. That guy's made, $40 million in his career. He's a legend. He's an absolute legend. Ryan Fitzpatrick, they both belong in the Hall of Fame. But, you're talking about a division that's truly – it's going to be – can the Bills stay healthy? That's always the thing, right? That's a caveat with all of these bets, especially when we're doing futures. Can these teams stay healthy? And, if certain things shake out early in the season, we might get this number at even money. We don't know. If someone goes down the offensive line – we don't know. So that's what I'm waiting at if I want to place a future bet on this. But yeah, I like the Dolphins there at second.
And then an incredibly competitive division in the AFC West. We got the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Broncos, the Raiders, all sitting at plus money. The Chiefs, your favorite, at plus 175. Chargers not far behind at plus 220. Broncos not far behind that at plus 260. The Raiders bringing up the rear at plus 650. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that because I don't think there's that big of a talent gap between the Raiders and any of these other teams. And so I think that number is at least attractive if I had to bet this division. I'm pretty high on the Chargers. I have a ton of Chargers futures tickets already. I have some Broncos futures tickets that I was able to kind of beat the book whenever the news that there was a rumor. I live on Twitter. I sit in front of a computer all day long. So when the Russell Wilson news came out, I ran to the book, so I have much better numbers than any of this. So I'm not going to discount that I have those tickets in the account. But I think the Broncos obviously certainly have a ton of potential as well. So where do you ultimately where do you ultimately think this shakes out? And 2, do you think there's any betting value here at these numbers?
Right. I think you can basically make an argument for each one of these offenses, right? That with Russell Wilson, clearly with Herbert being a perennial star, of eventual MVP winner, with the Raiders acquiring who they have on offense. What it comes down to for me is the defense, right? We know that the Chiefs' run defense was solid, but they've struggled in the past. What I'm looking at is the Denver defense. You take a look at what they do, and especially Patrick Surtain. So and as a Raiders fan, as a diehard Raiders fan, it pains me to say that I like the Broncos the most in this division because of that defensive side of it. Patrick Surtain, the second, he didn't allow over 76 yards at all in every single game last season as a rookie. So now you bring that back in the second year, and you look at how this division can shake out. Like you mentioned, there's a talent. The talent gap for all of these offenses is probably not that big. It's which defense can mitigate the 30-point game the most, and I think that's Denver in this division.
Yeah, I'm never going to count out the Chiefs. I actually think though them being the short shot in here. Look, I'd probably just put them pretty much dead even with the Chargers, the Broncos as far as odds go. I don't think that their roster, and I don't think it's going to be an incredibly smooth transition. People are just looking at this and Sky Moore didn't even run with the ones. He didn't take Patrick Mahomes played 11 snaps. Sky Moore wasn't out there for any of them, right? So he's a second team guy right now for them, and so. It's just I don't think this is this 1-for-1 trade Juju Smith-Schuster for Tyreek Hill, right? I just don't think that that's the way that this is going to play out. So, I think that this one's a little bit closer. Let's head over to the NFC, and this one is fairly interesting because, as you mentioned, Brian Daboll moves over to the New York Giants. They find themselves as actually the long shot here in this division at 8-1. The Commanders 5-1, Eagles 160, and then the Cowboys at 140. I'm a bit down on the Cowboys this year. I'm super down on the Commanders because, again, I'm a Carson Wentz hater. I think that this Cowboys squad, whenever you look at what they have on paper and you try to I understand Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones, giant gap in that. But outside of that, if you put these rosters down and you look at just that, and if you just can eliminate the quarterback position, there's not a really huge gap between these two teams as to what they have on both sides of the ball. And so to see an 8-1 on the Giants and then a plus 140 on the Cowboys, to me, I would say that there would be value on the Giants because I don't think the gap is that big.
Right. And it's sort of the explanation on other stuff that we just talked about of the long tail for the Giants is what if Brian Daboll's offense with Daniel Jones and Kadarius Toney. I am extremely bullish on all overs for Kadarius Toney, and he's at plus 10,000 on DK Sportsbook, the leading receiver in the NFL. If you want a long shot bet, that's one of them. But what I'm waiting for, and look, I agree with you in terms of this division, but if you take a look at the Cowboys at plus 140, their first 2 games are against Tampa Bay and Cincinnati. Wait till they go 0-2 or 1-1. Let this drift down to maybe 2-1. And then that's a solid bet in my opinion, right? Because I do still think that with Dak Prescott, with Ezekiel Elliott, with CeeDee Lamb now being the alpha receiver in that offense, I do think that the Dallas Cowboys can win this division. Look, they lost Cooper, they lost Cedric Wilson, they lost Gregory, and Gallup is hurt. So then you say, okay, well, what do they have? I still think that it comes down to their competition in this division, and I like them. But wait till week 3 to place features on Dallas.
So the Eagles, super popular pick here. Sirianni in his second year. You trade for A.J. Brown. You get Hassan Reddick to come in. You sign James Bradbury. I mean, these are all significant pickups for this team. Jaquiski Tart is either going to start or play significant roles there at the safety position. I think a sneaky good Zach Pascal signing as well to be your kind of third receiver, not your third option. That's always going to be Dallas Goedert. But I look at this team and I see an awesome offensive line. I see all these other things that are really going for them. To me, it all comes down to Jalen Hurts, which is the only thing why I can't just be all in on this team because I just don't know what we're going to get out of it.
Well, I think it's a lot of people, right? I think that's why the books are giving you that, it's a risk on, bet there, right? With the Eagles. And look, they finished 9-8 last year and, 18th in points allowed. Their defense will always be strong, especially with what they have on the defensive line. Their linebackers weren't great, so bringing in Hassan Reddick and those players, from an efficiency standpoint, for IDP, for fantasy, it's a lot better because they made so many tackles. But I'm still on Dallas here. I understand what you're saying about Philly, but still give me Dallas in week 3.
We'll finish up the last 2 divisions here in the NFC and talk some awards markets as well. These are some of the things that I do believe preseason you can still find value, even though people started to bet into these markets. I do believe that there are still some numbers out there and some players out there that might be falling under the radar. We'll see what Reid has in his account when we come back. Primetime action coming back. NFC North, we got the Packers at minus 190, the Vikings at plus 265, Lions, Bears, long shots, 10-1, 14-1. I have a lot of tickets on the Vikings, Reid. I am looking at this Packers team, and I understand that you have Aaron Rodgers. I do understand that. I also understand that Aaron Rodgers has always had an elite receiver to throw to since he has been there. And so I find it hard to believe that everyone thinks like, yeah, but it's just Aaron Rodgers. Well, yeah, we've seen a lot of really good quarterbacks who have been in varying situations that, despite the fact that they have all the talent in the world, were held back by whatever it might be. We can just talk. We literally just left talking about Russell Wilson last year. There was a no-win situation for him because of the talent around him. That happened to be the offensive line. But you look here from this Packers standpoint, and for them to be nearly minus $2 here to win this division, to me, seems just crazy. And the Vikings, what they did, while not huge moves in the offseason, were still moves that I liked, namely getting a new coach, like someone that is not stuck in, the NFL 20 years ago. And so I don't know, man. I don't know what you think about this division. Of course, I'd run through a wall for Dan Campbell. I figure all you got to do is watch one episode of Hard Knocks. I'm ready to ram my head through into this TV right now. But Bears, I think, is at 14-1. I don't know if that number is big enough. I think I need 41-1 before I would even look at that team. So how do you see this division?
Yeah, I think the Bears are 12-1 to be the worst team in the NFL, and that's something on why this number at 14-1, like you mentioned, at 14,000 should be the number there. The Bears. But you're right with the Packers. I feel I have the same sentiment about Green Bay of like Russell Wilson. We go back to the Russell Wilson analogy. I mean, you can't score if you don't make first downs on offense, right? And the defense is solid, but they lose to Darius Smith, who goes to Minnesota. So that's obviously an upgrade. And look, the defense on Minnesota, and I'll talk about O'Connell a little bit. They're getting Daniel Hunter back. They haven't had him for 2 years, and he's still 27 years old. So the age profile, the skill set that he is on that left side, and then you bring in Zadarius Smith, that is a fantastic bookend on the defensive line. And their secondary was completely banged up last season. So if those things go the other way for Minnesota, and on top of that, they must have had 80% of their games either won or lost by one score. If those losses become, and I know you can easily say on the other side, if those wins become losses, this team now has a guy like Kirk Cousins, who a lot of people are down on, but he's extremely efficient, and he has big games, multiple touchdown games, and Justin Jefferson, who is, again, a guy who can absolutely break every single record in the NFL. I am completely on board with you. I love Minnesota. I even love O'Connell on the Coach of the Year, which we'll get to in a little bit as well.
I think I really do like Minnesota here. Kelley, I know you're on Minnesota as well.
I bet all those two. Alt over the win total, Vikings to win the North, and O'Connell to win Coach of the Year. Let's go.
NFC South, the Bucs, minus 250 to take this one down. Saints at plus 310. Panthers 9-1. Falcons 35-1. Falcons are not going to win this division. So it comes down to a couple of these other teams. I don't think the Panthers are either. So can the Saints figure out some way to close the gap on the Bucs without there being some sort of Tom Brady injury? Because we can't predict injuries. So that would be how we have to handicap all of this. A little bit of murky stuff coming out now. It looked like Alvin Kamara was going to be able to play this whole season no matter what because the trial was going to get delayed. Now they're saying maybe there could be some suspension in mid-season or whatever. So there is at least that looming over the Saints. I don't think that's really going to completely change the way that you think about this team because Kamara, as dynamic of a player as he is, look, we're talking about a Saints team. Can Jameis Winston perform at the quarterback position? Does Michael Thomas look anything like Michael Thomas of 2 years ago? Those are the real questions here. I mean, yes, you want to have Alvin Kamara back there, but that's not going to make or break how you view this team completely. So my question to you, plus 310, is it worth a flyer, or are they still so far behind what the Bucs are going to field this year that you just be kind of wasting money?
No, I think it's worth the flyer to take plus 310, mainly because the delta between the Saints and the Bucs I don't think is that large. Right? If this was at plus 190, if it was $2, then okay, I get why the Saints shouldn't be where they are, right, compared to the Buccaneers. But again, like you mentioned, you have an aging Tampa Bay team. That coaching staff's going to look a little bit different. I know Tom Brady was that guy essentially running the plays on that offense, but you have some injuries like Chris Godwin. He's coming back from a pretty bad injury, and he's slated to come back early, but we just don't know, right? We just have no idea. And the Kamara suspension, yes, that's looming over, but the Saints are still a top 5 defense. And Dennis Allen, who's now the head coach, was the defensive coordinator. I'm still in on what they're able to do. I'm not as down on Jameis Winston as a lot of people are in terms of what he can do to win this division. Yeah. So I'm there. Like Chris Olave is someone that I really liked coming out of the draft. So yeah, I'm all over this, mainly because the delta between the Bucs and the Saints just doesn't make sense.
Chain mover and Jarvis Landry. So, again, a guy that you can just kind of look to. You got that 3rd and 5. He can run that 5-yard route, and he's going to catch it, and he's going to move the chains for you. So I'm kind of with you. I think the Saints are a super interesting team here. And again, we don't wish injury on anyone, but if something were to happen to Tom Brady, I think these teams are really, really close then at that point.
Blaine Gabbert was getting a lot of love this offseason. A little QB controversy.
Listen, we're in everyone's in the best shape of their life, part of the season right now. We're in the, hey, no one's ever looked better than they do right now, all of those things. So let's move to the award market here. MVP, certainly the most popular one. This is something that everybody is going to take a look at. We'll come back to the NFC West later if we can get to it, but I want to get these are some bets that I want to see because I know that you have some of these that you like here, Reid. Listen, the short shots, we get it. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. You make cases for all those guys. We get it, right? Is there anybody further down the board here that you started to look at that you feel like, hey, man, there's a direct line to these guys?
Yeah, it's Trey Lance, right? It's Trey Lance at plus 5,000 on the DK Sportsbook. He might be teetering around there at plus 4,000, but look, their win total right now on the DK on the book is, I believe, 10. So if they get over that, which I think they can, and they were competitive last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, it's mainly because, in my opinion, it's because of Trey Lance, right? And I know we can't correlate what Lamar Jackson did in that offense with Baltimore when he won MVP, but take a look at just comparing those two situations. Trey Lance has a better offense in San Francisco than Lamar Jackson did in Baltimore. And arguably, right, probably not arguably, he's got a better offensive coordinator in someone like Shanahan, who's going to specifically cater that offense to Trey Lance. So if they're winning games, in my opinion, that's Trey Lance at again, like I said, plus 5,000. And if that's still there, I think it's plus 4,000 now. Yeah. Absolutely, because if they can beat out the Rams in that division, they're most likely going to be leading that.
So I have a 60-1 on Lance for a lot of the stuff that you're talking about here. And, the NFC West just in general kind of up in flux right now. What's going on with Matthew Stafford? Don't really know. They say it's going to be fine. Do we believe them? Coaches don't always tell the truth. So, whatever. Right. So we kind of have to speculate with all of that. With the Trey Lance deal, it's a little bit different, and people are saying like, "Hey, yeah, man, he wasn't good enough to play last year, and what makes you think he's going to be good enough to play this year?" Well, look, we've had a lot of quarterbacks who have sat for a year and been able to come in and have some success, and then secondly, not a lot step into a situation where you have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle to throw the ball to. That's a pretty good situation to step into, right?
Exactly.
That is like a trio of top tier guys that most air quote rookies don't get to step in and get into. So I think that there is a clear path here because not only do you have those receivers, but we know he's going to do something with his legs. Now, is it Lamar Jackson-esque? Probably not, but if he adds another 500 yards, if he adds another 600 yards with his legs to go along with what he can do through the air, I do believe that there is a clear path. And for whatever reason, if they are able to overtake the Rams or I don't think the Cardinals are, maybe they will, maybe the Cardinals or whatever, but if they were able to overtake those two teams and get in there, that is he's going to be in the mix anyway. He's going to be in the conversation, and to have a long shot ticket on him like that, then that's really all you're asking.
Right. I would bet this down to probably plus 2,500. Yeah. And look, if you're sitting on a plus 60 or if you have a plus 40, whatever it is, you're going to feel pretty good when these guys go because their schedule isn't terrible, and they're facing, I believe, the Rams after their week 6 or week 7 bye. So you take a look on how these things can manifest, and you're right. You're absolutely right. Like at sitting there, maybe they're 4-2, 5-2, and Lance is now at plus 1,400.
Yeah.
It's more of a positive EV bet that, hey, even if he doesn't do it, you're still feeling pretty good, and you're cheering for someone like Trey Lance, who is going to be exciting to watch as well.
Yeah, I like to take these longer shot guys, specifically quarterbacks in this MVP market, before they have a chance, like you said, for these odds to just shrink to basically nothing. And so I really do like to get those tickets in the account. And a guy like him, I do have a couple of other ones as well, some super long shot guys. But again, they're all quarterbacks. They're all guys that I think could possibly have big seasons, including, we just said we like that Vikings team. I have one on Kirk Cousins as well. If they were able to explode, then I want to go ahead and have that ticket in the account. We'll talk offensive player of the year. We'll talk offensive rookie of the year, comeback player, coach of the year. All right. So Reid, rookie of the year is fairly interesting because typically we would just be looking down and we'd be like, okay, what quarterback? And then let's narrow it down. And that's the quarterback we're going to pick. Well, we only had one first-round quarterback, and he's not going to start for his team. So this is a completely different look this year than we've had in recent years because we can really and truly start to look at other positions, whereas we'd say, look, they're going to defer to a quarterback more times than not. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's going to be enough reps for any of these guys. And so with that being said, what do you kind of look at here from the rookie of the year standpoint?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways you can go. I think Breece Hall is interesting at plus 18 or plus 800, but I think it's still a little short for someone that we just don't know what his role is going to be. The two guys that I'm really focusing on, and specifically because of role, is Kenneth Walker the third at plus 1,200 and Drake London at the same price, basically because of the opportunity, like you just mentioned, right? If Penny is basically a soft tissue injury away from missing 10 games, like he always is, Carson is gone, Russell Wilson is gone. So what else is in there? What else do they have, right? So give me Walker there at plus 1,200, and Drake London is again the opportunity. Marcus Mariota has never supported a top-end wide receiver. I think the most yards that he supported is at like a 945 to Rashad Matthews back when he was in Tennessee. But again, who else do you have to throw to other than Kyle Pitts in that offense? Mm-hmm. That offense is going to be down most of these games. And if Drake London, first wide receiver taken off the board, the draft capital is there. They're definitely going to want to use him. He's going to be that big body. Give me him at plus 1,200 as well.
I'm gonna get wacky here with you guys on this one. So if the Panthers start 1-6, and then at that point Matt Rule's on the hot seat, right? And like, what do you do when you're on the hot seat? You try to appease the fans. You try to do something drastic. You try to. Could Matt Corral at 75-1, if he were to start 10 games this year, could he find himself at least in the mix?
Well, is Tepper going to allow, after acquiring Baker Mayfield, to basically leapfrog that acquisition to appease? Yeah, look, I get what you're saying, but Corral, I think what a lot of people are doing with Corral is they're looking at his offseason tape, right now on social media. They're saying this guy should be the starter, right? Because what he's doing in practice. But again, even though Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold are not the answer in Carolina, I understand that they're not the answer. Macro, that is a little crazy. If you wanted to get really crazy, right? It's Malik Willis plus 5,000 because if something happens to Tannehill, when you have a dual threat like him and Derrick Henry, the sky's the limit with that offense. Granted, right, that you need an injury to make that bet pay out, in my opinion. So staying close to the top, right? These markets usually don't really deviate from that. So give me the London and Walker at plus. I think plus 1,200 is still a good number on both those guys.
Yeah, I do too. I think the only other long shot I would look at, and look, there's a decent chance that if he's absolutely horrible, they would just go to Heineke anyway. But Sam Howell, I think, is at least fairly interesting in Washington because I think that there's a path for that team to be pretty bad. And then look, they're not invested in Wentz like long term, and that's not they know he's not the future of the franchise or anything. And so, do they go to Heineke if they have a horrible record anyway, or do you see if what you have in Sam Howell, do you see if there's anything there for him? I think that's the only other one for me. Comeback player of the year is always a very weird market because what are these people actually coming back from, And so some of it's just shame sometimes, like we look down the list and we're going, what is Baker Mayfield coming back from? Shame? I mean, so it's a very weird one. I mean, Derrick Henry did come back last year. So this was so weird that he's like the favorite. He did come back last year. He already came back.
Also, how is this Deshaun Watson number barely moved? We've been talking about this for like 4 months.
Yeah, what's he coming back from?
This is nothing.
Yeah, it's like no one's gonna vote for this guy. Like zero chance. So you look. I mean, Jameis, it's sitting at 550. He is coming back off of an injury. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is coming back off an injury. Here we go again with the Daniel Jones things. Like he's just coming back off being bad. I mean, So how do you even look at this, or do you ever even look at this?
Sometimes I do. If there's a clear-cut favorite, like you mentioned, though, like what are these guys coming back from? Like, Baker had a litany of injuries, but he played through all of them because he was playing for his other contract that he knew he needed to get with another team. But you take a look at this, and my eyes instantly go to someone like Chase Young at plus 1,400 with how pivotal he was to that defense and what he was doing in that defense. If he's able to basically replicate what he's able to do this year, I think that's a fantastic bet at plus 1,400. But it's hard to go away from Christian McCaffrey at plus 750, just because of we always label these guys, and we did this with Keenan Allen all the time, is that, he's injury prone because he got injured in back-to-back seasons. Well, that was the case with CMC. What if he doesn't get injured? And he is if Matt Rule wants to keep his job, give this guy the ball 0.9% of the time. Run him into the ground. It's the same thing they did with Derrick Henry last year. Granted, he got hurt, but CMC at plus 750, he is that offense.
Yeah, I love that one. I think the only other one, if anybody out there was looking for a long shot, I mean, again, we talk about how thin the receiver position is in Tennessee. Robert Woods is coming off of, so he fits that narrative of the coming off of an injury thing, right? And so if he becomes the de facto number one because Treylon Burks can't figure out this offense, which is kind of what we're hearing out of camp right now, that he's really struggling grasping the offense. So if Robert Woods becomes the de facto number one, I think there's worse long shot tickets you could have in your account, right? I mean, 50-1, he's not supposed to win that very often, obviously. I mean, he's most likely not going to win. But what if Robert Woods bounces back with a 1,200-yard season or something like that and becomes your de facto number one? Then I think there's at least a conversation.
Right, and it's hard to, other than a guy like CMC and Henry, it's hard to go with any of these other running backs because they're on committees, right? J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers. So, I like that call.
So, Coach of the Year is always an interesting one as well because you're kind of having to handicap the team as well, not necessarily the job that the coach is going to do, because there's a lot of coaches I think who've done a great job, but the record doesn't necessarily always reflect it. So here we go into the shortest shot being 14-1. How do you kind of look at this market, and where do you see this maybe shaking out?
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell is my favorite at plus 2,000. We already kind of lamented on that. I think another one is Dennis Allen. I talked about with the Saints. And what's interesting about this market too is you kind of have to have a quarterback that's not great, right? Like a Kirk Cousins type, right?
Yes. To where they can't just say, well, of course he's going to.
Exactly.
Well,
that's
of course.
Why Shanahan, in my opinion, probably should have won last year, just keeping that team competitive with all the injuries. And that's why Shanahan, I don't think, wins this year, because if they do well, it's going to be because Trey Lance, right, quote unquote. So give me a guy like O'Connell. Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins played at a ceiling level last year. I don't think that they can, they potentially could, but with him coming over now and basically changing that offense, right? Fifth in yards and second in touchdowns for the Rams last season. He brings that to this team. Boy, that could be great. And Dennis Allen, like if they beat the Bucs, he is going to be that guy there that, again, with Jameis Winston, it's not going to be because Jameis Winston. It's going to be because Dennis Allen really honed in on that defense and was able to get this team to win without someone like Breeze and Sean Payton.
If you have any interest whatsoever in Dan Campbell, you should bet him now, because by the time Hard Knocks is over, he's plus 1,800 right now. He's 18-1. He's going to be minus 1,800 by the time that the Hard Knocks is over. Everyone's going to love this guy
From your
so
bets
much.
alone, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. So if you have any inkling whatsoever, you better get in. He's going to be minus money by the time this is all said and done.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.